time with Tanya for part 2 of Strings of Gold. The highway stretched before Elijah like a silken ribbon, unfurling through a winter tapestry. Towering pines arched overhead, their needles dusted in a crystalline frost that caught the pale sunlight and shattered it into 1,000 icy sparks. The air was sharp enough to bite his cheeks as it carried the tang of evergreen wood smoke drifting from hidden cabins. His violin rested at his side in its case, its warm amber varnish glowing against the cold as if the instrument itself harbored a hearth inside. His possessions were few, but his purpose was vast. He sought not the thunder of clapping hands, but the silent quiver of awakened souls. In Columbia, he stopped at a weathered porch where a widow sat, her shawl wrapped tight against the wind. He imagined the hush in her chest when his bow coaxed out a gentle melody, and as he continued, a single droplet of grief caught the light as it fell, darkening the weathered pine beneath her rocking chair. In the outskirts of Florence, he found farmhands crouched over frost-crusted soil, their breath curling into pale ghosts in the morning air. His reels urged their weary muscles awake, the melodies driving burrows through frozen tears and laughter through frozen lungs. In Charleston's narrow streets, children chased each other beneath gas lamps, their laughter as bright as fireflies. There he spun old jigs before them, so alive that he felt he could taste their joy, sweet as molasses and warm as sunlight on cold cheeks. It was in Charleston that his bow found its truest voice. The city lay hushed under swags of lanterns draped over wrought iron balconies. Each flame quivered against draping Spanish moss that swayed like silent metronomes in the salt-tinged breeze. Wreaths of holly and bay leaves, glossy and fragrant, graced every door, their deep greens and reds glowing against white clapboard walls. But beneath the festive shimmer, a brittle tension trembled in the cold. Neighbors walked with careful distance. Black and white worshippers sang identical carols beneath separate doors, where beneath their feet ran fault lines no eye could see, but every heart could feel. Elijah approached a tall whitewashed church, whose slender steeple seemed to pierce the slate sky. Candlelight flickered beneath the stained glass, casting jeweled pools of crimson and emerald light into the bricks below. Evergreen wreaths hung from the church's massive mahogany doors. Their red ribbons stirred gently in the night air. Inside, crimson and evergreen robes rustled like gift wrap as the choir members filled into formation, their polished shoes marking quiet rhythm against the worn wooden floors. The air smelled faintly of incense, old hymnals, warmed beeswax, and polished pews. When the choir's hymn rose, clear, tremulous, the same melody on every tongue, their voices filled the rafters, yet quivered with unspoken walls between pews. Elijah lingered at the back, his violin case cradled like a promise. A deacon in a stiff white collar regarded him with careful suspicion. "Do you play?" he demanded, as he clutched a leather-bound hymnal to his chest. Elijah nodded, voice low and steady. "I do." The deacon studied him a heartbeat longer, then inclined his head. "You're welcome to play here this evening." When the final choir note dissolved into the hush, Elijah lifted his beloved violin. The varnished wood gleamed under candlelight as his bow kissed the strings. What emerged was a tone both rough and radiant. No polished concert hall precision, but the living pulse of earth and memory. He began with an old hymn, its familiar melody stretching and sighing as he wove African melodies through its veins. The note then spiraled into Appalachian reels that echoed mountain hollows and kinship. Each phrase conjured a different heartbeat, a low thrum like distant drums, a quicksilver dance like bluegrass fiddles at dawn, a solemn hush like midnight prayers in candlelit chapels. At first, the congregation stiffened. Folded hands shivered, a murmur rippled through the benches. Then, a black seamstress in the front row, her fingers still stained with thread and ink, lifted her head. As Elijah's bow sang, she caught the melody and began to hum, her voice trembling like a candle flame until it steadied and filled the aisle. Opposite her, an elderly white man, hair silver beneath the flickering candles, cleared his throat. Uncertainty softened into resolve. He joined her in a hesitant note. By the second verse, their voices had woven into one ribbon of sound. Others picked up the thread. Low contraltos, bright tenors, the soft rustle of skirts against wooden floors, until the church seemed to pulse with taps and hand claps. The walls that had held them apart trembled under the force of unity and music. Elijah's bow danced like fire on the strings, entwining sorrow and hope with every single stroke. Golden filaments of song seemed to stretch from the violin to each listening heart, stitching open wounds with a melody. He closed his eyes and felt those strands binding soul to soul, weaving broken edges into something whole. At last, when he drew out one single aching note, it hung in the rafters like new fallen snow. It seemed as if in that moment the world paused, breathless and full of promise. The seamstress and the old man remained side by side, their faces luminous in the candlelight, speaking a truth that no one word could capture, for this night the old divides had melted away. Elijah lowered his violin, offered a gentle nod, and slipped out into the chill air before the first clap could rise. Outside, the harbor wind carried the sharp bite of salt and the resinous scent of pine, while distant bells tolled midnight over dark waters. With his violin case tucked beneath his arm, he walked on into the night, the echoes of unity trailing behind him like a benediction. Thank you for joining me for Storytime with Tanya for part 2 of Strings of Gold. Stay tuned for part 3, the finale, coming next week.